Thank you so much for joining me today. And many of you clicked on this because you saw the word tariffs. It's a sexy word, I'm not going to lie. It is all over the place. It's in the media, every headline, every newspaper, every article that you click on. And even if you're reading something about sports or culture or food, I can almost guarantee you below that article or off to the side, you're going to see something about tariffs. Now, off camera, I was kind of joking, although this is maybe a more serious matter. I'm going to take this as a personal challenge today. I was joking that so many real estate agents are talking about this, and you could put together a podcast of absolutely nothing sensible or knowledgeable. But as long as you have the word tariffs in there, I bet you'll get 10,000 views. So on the Last Honest Realtor, we probably average around 500 views on YouTube. Yeah, we just started. It's not a ton. But I am very curious to know if we put the word tariffs in the title today, are we going to get all-time high views? In all seriousness, that's what we want to talk about today. We don't really want to talk about tariffs. We want to talk about why we're talking about tariffs. Do you follow that logic? It's not the tariffs, it's the why. Because from our perspective, it's really about the mindset. It's about consumer confidence. It's about the discussions that people are having. It's about the actions people are taking, or as you're going to learn very shortly, the inactions. Now, I had not touched on Donald Trump or tariffs over the last couple of weeks. And it's not because I was shying away from it. To be perfectly honest, and this might sound a little arrogant, but then again, it's called the Last Honest Realtor. I just don't feel like real estate agents going out there and opining on things for which they may not be qualified is worthwhile. I wrote on my blog, do any of us care what Becky the Realtor thinks about cheese that's Canadian made versus cheese from Wisconsin? Becky the Realtor on TikTok telling us about our national pride in buying Canadian. Come on, guys, honestly. My job is to sell real estate on the Last Honest Realtor and on Toronto Realty blog. I continue to try to tell the stories from the real estate market, give statistics, empower the consumer with knowledge, and tell the stories. And I really did not want to tackle this today. But people started asking me why I'm not. And then I started to think, well, if they think I'm shying away from it, I am not. Now, at the risk of becoming a cheerleader, I'm also not looking today to tell you everything's going to be fine. And for those of you that are old enough to remember Jim Cramer from Mad Money, for those of you who have no idea what I'm talking about, I want you to Google this. Jim Cramer, Bear Stearns, or throw in the word 2008. In 2008, watch the movie The Big Short, if you're not familiar with this. But in 2008, we had the worldwide financial crisis. And at the time, Jim Cramer had a TV show called Mad Money. And there's a famous clip of him reading a letter from somebody saying, is it time to get out of Bear Stearns? And he screams into the camera, Bear Stearns is fine. That was at $62 a share, and they went under. Lehman Brothers went under too, for those of you that remember this. So I always think of Jim Cramer, Bear Stearns is fine. I don't want to be the guy screaming Bear Stearns is fine. That is why I've brought with me my partner in crime, Chris Kik. Not because he's the bear to my bull or he's the yin to my yang. He keeps me in check. Chris has the distinction, unfortunately, of being the smartest person I know in real estate. And I say unfortunately because I always tell him that he's just too smart to be in real estate. And so we have these really knowledgeable, intelligent conversations about economics and business and real estate. And then I think about Becky the Realtor, who probably sold a bunch of condos to girls in her spin class because she's a part-time spin instructor as well. So Chris is here. Chris is going to be the yin to my yang. That was a longer introduction than I promised you. But Chris, can I get right to it? I want to know what you think the vibe is out there in the real estate market.
Well, that was quite an introduction. Let me just start there.
So unlike me.
I thought I was going to be the bear today, and you're talking about 2008 financial crisis. The vibe out there is uncertainty, if I could sum it up in one word. That being said, I would have had an intro that was a little bit more rosy than you did.
Really?
I think we've had actually a really good start to the year. Mm-hmm. Good properties are still moving, and there's a lot of buyers out there and not so many sellers. I think the supply demand dynamic is going to continue to put some upward pressure on good real estate in Toronto. And I don't think that the tariffs per se are going to be the end of the world.
Okay, so we have this conversation a lot in the office, off camera. Speaking just as a Torontonian, as a Canadian, as somebody that works in real estate, somebody that has a family, somebody that works with buyers, with sellers, what are you feeling out there from your buyer clients, your seller clients, the real estate agents you're talking to, guys you know in finance, I don't know, a friend that's opening a pizza shop? I can opine. I can speak to the camera. I brought you in because I want a different voice. What are you feeling out there in the real estate market right now? What are people saying?
I think
your exasperation there, for those that are listening and not watching, was pretty indicative.
Well, but that's it. That sums it up. I mean, I think that's what people are thinking. I mean, I think if you've been following the news cycle at all, we've literally just consumed a year's worth of news in about 2 weeks, right? I mean, the news stories are now sounding like scrolling through Instagram or TikTok. Like, I can't keep track. And I think that sums up kind of where people are. There's a lot of buyers that are like, whoa, there's volatility out there. Anyone in business will probably tell you they're not making any major purchases right now. It's a sit and wait and see sort of mentality. And, there's opportunity in that too. At the same time, there's people that life goes on, you've got to buy and you've got to sell depending on what you're doing. So people get pregnant, people need bigger homes. So, I think so far the real estate market is pretty robust, but there's a lot of people that are sitting on the sidelines saying, I'm not going to do anything and just see how this goes.
So you mentioned people sitting on the sidelines. So I've told the story on my blog and an e-newsletter. I'm going to tell this one again. Matthew and I sold an investment condo to a would-be investor. And this was in the first week of January. And we were in the conditional period. And the buyer said, I'm not going to go forward because we're only 5 days from January 20th. And I want to know on January 20th, I want to obtain some certainty. And I said to him on the phone, what's happening on January 20th? Now, I knew the answer. Donald Trump's taking office. I was being sarcastic. I said, what's happening? And of course he said, well, I'm going to get some certainty. And I said, sorry, Donald Trump's going to take office and you're getting certainty?
Right.
Have you seen what's happened since then?
Yeah.
We live in uncertainty. So I said to him, here's my 2 cents. You need to accept uncertainty as the only certainty moving forward. On January 20th, Donald Trump takes office. And his whole thing is he going to bring in tariffs? Now, I'm not going to say that I saw this whole thing coming, which is that Donald Trump is holding the entire world hostage every single day. But what I said to him was, we are going to have this kind of noise for 4 years. We have no functioning government in Canada right now because the Prime Minister has stepped down and they're running a leadership convention while we've prorogued Parliament. So I'll try not to get too political, but now would probably be a time when you want a functioning government.
But we're going to stay on topic.
We are. Yeah. We're not going to go there. Then you've got, after the leadership convention and potentially with a federal election, you, in the middle of this, have a provincial election. So I said to this guy, you got a provincial election, a federal leadership race, a prorogue Parliament, a federal election, and 4 years of Donald Trump. You are not getting any certainty. And I concluded with this. Uncertainty is the new certainty. Uncertainty is the only certainty. And I gave him this phrase: accept the new normal. This is the new normal. So what are you telling your buyers or your sellers? And we're talking off camera, you have all these stories. You met a couple that, own a duplex together, or you've got buyers that were looking, and here's the funny thing, Chris mentioned being pregnant. You've got somebody that's 5 months pregnant in December, and they're like, we're going to start looking in the new year because we're in a condo and we want to buy a house. Those people didn't stop being pregnant. They're going to continue being pregnant.
Life goes on. I mean, what you're saying is probably not a popular line, right? Like, welcome to the new normal. But it's true. I mean, we had January 20th and now we've got people saying, well, I'm going to wait for March 4th. Right. And then I'm sure after that, they're going to say, I'm waiting for April and May and 4 years later, this is going to be the new normal. And I think that the Donald Trump administration is going to fundamentally change the makeup of the United States government and all the institutions within it. And that's going to have a huge impact on Canada and the rest of the world. But at the same time, we are a sovereign nation and life goes on.
For now.
For now. I mean, I'm not worried about that. I think that might be a bit far-fetched. But life happens, and I think that, the market will continue. So, there's going to be winners and losers. Mm-hmm. The politicians in our country and in the U.S. and around the world are probably thinking, don't waste a crisis, right? This is why you're seeing,
it's a good line.
The provincial election, right? There's opportunists out there. They see a winning opportunity for themselves to gain more power or make more money. Same, I've got some friends in small business. They're winners. They're going to be huge winners here, right? They're getting calls from bigger Canadian companies that they would never have heard from before as they are basically onshoring their supply chain. So there's going to be small businesses that win from this. And there's probably, if the tariffs do come through, there's going to be some losers as well.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned March 4th because You had Donald Trump on February 4th or whenever it was, 30 days, say, I'm extending a 30-day leave, leave of absence or what have you. And then so everyone's going to circle March 4th in their calendars. So, right, big circle. Okay, March 4th, 30 days.
Yeah, where are we now? Or February?
Right. So then what happens if we get to March 4th? He's going to say what? You get another week, you get another month, you get 3 months. Or he's going to have some other insane idea, right? I'm buying the moon, right?
Right.
I'm buying the moon. I'm going to colonize the moon, right? Okay, perfect. We're colonizing the moon. So in all seriousness, right, you said the new normal. That's not going to be a popular answer. That's not what people want to hear. And again, we're not going to get into, Donald Trump, the person, or even the mandate or the agenda or the why of all of this. We're real estate agents. Okay. I don't want to be Becky the realtor talking about Canadian cheese right now. But what I would offer in terms of this new normal is a time where everything was fine, relatively speaking. And I was younger at this time. Oh my God, I don't even want to say how young I was, but I had my whole life ahead of me. And everything was amazing and it was fine. The real estate market was moving. This was a seller's market. And we had multiple offers on condos, right? We don't anymore, right? We had multiple offers on condos, we had tons of multiple offers on houses. Prices were reasonable. Interest rates were what they were. Life was fantastic. And then, oh my gosh, we woke up one day and the world actually stopped turning. And I'm serious. The world stopped turning. Literally, just figuratively. We stopped leaving our houses. We didn't go to restaurants. We didn't go to gyms. We didn't go into properties and look at them in order to buy. The world stopped.
This is 2020.
This is 2020. This is COVID. This is March of 2020. And so to compare the two, some people might be watching or listening and say, I have no idea where he's going with this, or I know where he's going with this and I don't like it. But follow my logic here, guys. It was absolutely unprecedented and it was a worldwide crisis. Think about this. I know we've spent a lot of time and maybe money in therapy trying to block all this out. But I remember March of 2020, and I remember not going to work at my job, and I remember not going to the gym and not going to restaurants and everyone staying home and saying, how are we going to get through this? Now, I don't want to undermine that was a difficult time for a lot of people. Lives were lost. I'm not trying to make light of it, but what I'm saying is we figured it out. And it was in April that we had 2,800 sales. That's very few as far as Toronto goes. In May, we were doing showings with masks on. Mm-hmm. Some of us wore rubber gloves. There were no double bookings. And people were out. And we had the government telling us what we could and couldn't do. Maybe you could go to a gym. Maybe you could open your restaurant. Remember golfing? You weren't allowed to sit in a cart with somebody, but they didn't care if you drove to the course together.
Yeah, it was a crazy time.
And so history will probably make fun of that. But point is, we figured out a way to do it.
I mean, the point that I hear you making more than anything is that often things don't work out exactly how you think they're going to.
Right.
I remember that March, we took basically every listing we had off the market. And for probably 4 or 5 weeks, it was kind of like this, what are we going to do? The market crashed, the stock market crashed, everything stopped.
Stock market dropped 40%, almost 50.
Yeah. And I mean, that was it. The media went nuts and we were all miserable and the lockdowns happened. And then something happened that we just didn't plan for. And the government got involved and the central bank got involved. And, that to some extent might happen here as well with the tariffs. But then the market went absolutely parabolic. And we were bananas. We were
BANANAS.
Yeah, we were busier than we've ever been.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I guess I'm cognizant of the fact that if we do get into a really, really bad trade war, that it's likely that depending on who is in government is going to step in and have some sort of fiscal policy to prop up the economy. The bank could slash interest rates and we could see another asset bubble. It's possible. Mm-hmm. I think we've learned from COVID. But, I remember thinking in March, okay, we're never going to sell another thing. And then we had record years. So to sit here now and look at kind of what's happening in the media cycle and say, this is it. This is going to be the end. The market's going to crash. I'm aware that it doesn't always work out the way you think it is.
Yeah. And I'll give a personal anecdote. I remember standing in the office of my home. I've got a home office there. It looks out of the front yard. And I'm on the phone with my brother, who loves to be a public figure. He's going to love him talking about a conversation we had. But I remember talking to him about personal finance and saying, Neil, I could survive for 11 months if I never make another dollar. That was, I had calculated based on COVID, right? And listen, there are
lucky for you.
Right, I was just going to say, right? Like there are 11. I knew Chris was going to say that. There are restaurant owners that went under, and there are gym owners. But my point is, I was going to say, with my expenses and my burn and my life, if I don't make another penny, I've got 11 months. And I remember having this conversation with my brother, and it was so real at that time. And again, fault me if you're the viewer or the listener for comparing COVID to what's happening right now. But what I'm saying is this: during COVID, we continue to talk about these two lines, these uncertain times, and people would talk about unprecedented, right? Here we are again. These are uncertain times. This is unprecedented. And to be honest, nothing's really happened yet. We've got all these threats of tariffs and all this conversation about tariffs. And I don't know, building hotels in the Middle East and colonizing the moon, right? We're going to colonize Greenland. The moon, right? Greenland's so hot right now. But I guess it can be scary. It can be funny. We're trying to make light of it. But it is really the uncertainty that we're talking about. And again, I go back to the beginning of this podcast when I said this wasn't something that I wanted to really discuss, but so many real estate agents and other people are chatting about it. And I don't want to be Jim Cramer and say, hey guys, everything's fine, because that's, well, somewhat misleading or immature. But I do, to some extent, think it's eventually going to be fine. I'm just saying that we've got to get there first. And the lack of certainty, and for people to be somewhat concerned on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, totally warranted. Uncertain times, unprecedented. But as we continue to come back to, the world will continue to spin. People need to live somewhere.
It has. I mean, if I'm being honest, if I hadn't read a newspaper or watched any news, honestly, up until this point, nothing's changed. I mean, I think we've had a very strong start to the year.
Okay.
The condo market, there's another topic for another blog or another podcast.
Sure.
Is the kind of this tale of two cities, but that's also been true in other markets. I don't know. Nothing has happened yet. There's just a lot of talk about what is going to happen.
You're talking real estate. When you had said nothing has changed, I'm looking out the window and I'm picturing my walk to Tim Hortons. During COVID, I couldn't walk to Tim Hortons, and if I did, I was wearing a mask. Now, during all this uncertain times and this unprecedented times, it hasn't changed me taking my kids to school. It hasn't changed me grocery shopping. It hasn't changed.
It changed Tim Hortons' ad campaign during the Super Bowl. Did you see that?
No, I did not.
Oh, another opportunistic media campaign, right? I was like, that football is the second best sport, right? They sang it to the good old hockey game.
Meant. Oh.
Yeah, the good old second best game or whatever, it went like that. And it was like, they're positioning themselves as Canadian, right? And they want to win consumers. They're probably going to boom, right?
You know why?
Tim Hortons sales are going to go through the roof.
I didn't see that ad because I turned it off when it was 57-0.
Yeah, not a great game.
No, but okay. So the point you're making is nothing's really changed the real estate market. I'm looking at our day-to-day lives, whether it's getting coffee or whether it's taking our kids to school, and I'm thinking COVID affected everything in our world. Here we're talking about our economy. We're talking about maybe some friends of ours or some business owners that might be directly affected by potential tariffs if and when they come in. But for the viewer and for the listener, who of course are watching and listening to the Last Honest Realtor because it's about real estate, let's talk about, and be Chicken Little for a minute here. What's the worst possible scenario? Why don't we have that conversation just to have fun, just to say we did? What's the worst possible scenario in all of this as far as the real estate market goes?
A 25% tariff across the board turns into a trade war. Canadian GDP drops 20% within 4 or 5 months. Has a knock-on effect into basically every industry. Incomes drop, and that would knock on to real estate, right? I mean, you'd probably see a corresponding drop in price
or sales, right?
Again, there's going to be winners and losers. So geographically, I mean, I don't like when we talk about Canadian housing, right?
Sure.
Because like Toronto is very different than anywhere else in the world or in the country. So I personally believe that Toronto real estate will probably be immune to some of that worst case scenario.
To some extent.
But yeah, it'll see. I mean, our biggest industries are finance based, so they're obviously going to have an impact from industry that's getting knocked down by tariffs, and that probably will have an impact on residential real estate.
But I mean,
to some extent.
The couple that, one of them's a teacher and, one of them is, I don't know, insert other occupation here, they're not affected by this. I think you could go down a list of people that are not going to be affected by, on the one hand, all of the noise, which is just what it is. On the other hand, if you're talking a full out trade war. So I look at this and I say, if you were to look, on a micro level, The guy that owns a $6 million home in Rosedale, he's not going to be forced to sell it. So on a very, very small basis, if you were to say, well, let's say there was downward pressure on rents for some argument's sake. Well, okay, if rents were to go down 8%, all of a sudden people that are getting $2,100 instead of $2,200, it's not enough to move the needle. It's not enough to really crush or, in my opinion, impact the real estate market. So I go back to the person that is 5 months pregnant in December and they need to buy a house, and here they are in February, they're still pregnant, they're still buying a house. They might not because of fear, but I don't think that fear is going to be as present in this market as it necessarily was at the absolute peak of COVID when we saw sales drop to 2,800. So let's move forward. Okay, we're in February. We're going to go into March, April, May, into prime spring market months. What do you think is going to happen? And I'm not saying widely speculate, but use our listings as an example, right? We've got some nice East Side properties coming out. We've got some buyers across the board that are looking. Do you see these properties not selling? Do you see them not selling for as much? Do you see your buyers deciding not to go ahead and buy? Give us the high level on a micro basis.
I think you'll see a certain segment of the buyer demographic sit on the sidelines throughout the spring. There's just going to be continued volatility, as we've discussed. I think that Toronto specifically, there is quite a lot of price inelasticity. There's a lot of money in the city. So I think AAA properties are going to sell, and I think they're going to sell in multiple offers. Yeah. I don't think that's going to change. I also think it's likely that if we did see a worst case scenario from the trade war or tariff, that we are going to see some government intervention, and the bank's probably going to slash interest rates. And I don't know how that's going to all balance out, but it's probably going to stimulate the real estate market to some extent as well.
Okay, so I want to come back to that after. But so we're looking, and again, this, we usually delayed a week or so, but we're filming this. It's mid-February now. There's a few sales on the east side that I'm tracking. So we've got a Leslieville property coming out. As I do with a lot of my seller clients, I put together a Google sheet. Every listing that comes out that's similar to theirs geographically or in terms of price or style, I update it. The last few sales, so you had Morse, $250,000 over. You had the one on Howland, $450,000 over. There's two more sales I populated in that sheet today, $300,000 over and $400,000 over. That's over list for those in layman's terms. They're looking at those sales. They're like, this is amazing. Okay, but here's what they're not seeing. The properties that didn't sell failed on their offer nights. So you said the A-plus properties are still going to sell. And here's what we were discussing earlier off camera. I think that in this particular market, your A-plus properties, they're going to get multiple offers. They're going to sell. Your C's are not selling. Your D's sure aren't selling. Your B's, you want to take like a $1.3 million property, you want to list it at $1,099,000 and you expect 6 offers like you used to. Not for a B-, not with a poor agent, poor representation, poor presentation, no strategy, no follow through, all the things we talk about here on the podcast on Toronto Realty blog. So I agree with you. And I think the other point that you had made was a smaller percentage of the buyer pool will sit on the sidelines. So if you look at the overall buyer pool and you want to say, divide it by houses in condos, or divide it by, say, Gen Z or baby boomer or whatever it is, or you divide it by price, or you divide it by geography. Any way you look at that, there's a small percentage of buyers that are going to say, I can't handle this.
But there's a lot of those buyers that shouldn't be out there in the first place too. I mean, this happened before, right? It's like, in COVID, we were seeing we went from 8 offers on an offer night to like 17 or something, right? Yeah. But you saw the offers. I mean, there was probably 8 of them out of the 17 that had no business making an offer on that property, or just,
all with the discount agents. My friend Becky, the realtor spin instructor, she's giving me half the commission back. So here's my offer of below list with 3 conditions.
So, but right now, right, if the market was seeing a drop, I wouldn't expect to see 10 offers on say Logan or something like that. But that's what we're seeing, right? Yeah. Good properties are selling in high multiple offers on offer night. Yeah. B, C properties, maybe not. Right. But I think that the tire kickers are going to be the first ones to sit on the sidelines.
Interesting. Well, there's that old adage, in a recession, first you sell the Porsche, then you sell the cottage, right? Then eventually...
Yeah, sure, your home is the last
primary residence. Right? Yeah. And so by the same token, if you take it into the buyer pool and you say the first people that are out are the tire kicker fair weather buyers. So when we were doing open houses for some of our East Side listings in January, we noticed this trend of like 80 to 100 buyers coming through on the weekend, and they're all holding like their $14 coffees, but they don't have any money to buy real estate. And then they complain about the price of real estate, the process of listing and selling real estate. And those are the people that are the tourists. They're not making offers. When the market was ripping, they might have made some of those crummier offers. They're out of the market. And if you continue, the next level up are the ones that, we had, for example, Chris and I had this listing in the West End. We got a really great offer from a bona fide buyer. Then we got a really crummy offer from somebody whose agent said, are you ready for this? My clients are for real. They've been making some really great offers lately.
All cash offer, I think she said.
Right.
Yeah.
They've been making some great offers lately. So plural. They're making offers plural. You're only buying one house. And what she effectively meant is our clients are running around the city lowballing people. They've made great offers plural. Those are the people, again, that I think are the next level up in the buyer pool, that you've got a listing for $2.5 million and it's brand new. Someone eventually buys that for $2,450 or $2,500. They're the ones offering $2,200 and making 8 to 10 of these offers and thinking maybe once I'll get one. They're the next people out. And then eventually what's left are what? The serious buyers.
Right. Well, but those are like the opportunists. Do you remember when COVID, we had that place in the East End and March came and we had these listings and we got like, someone offered us 50 cents on the dollar for that house, right?
Yeah.
Like, sorry, we're in like literally a crisis and you're trying to steal away real estate. Like, I don't know. The markets are funny, right? Like people
well, that guy's like, we're ready to colonize the moon. And that guy's like, look, 50 cents on the dollar. That's pretty good. Soon we won't even have a currency.
Exactly.
So the unprecedented times. I mean, look, I think all jokes aside, it's not that bad. I think having this conversation, and by the way, coming to this podcast, I said to Chris, I was like, I don't have a topic for today. Let's just go in there completely unscripted. No, because I'm so tired of, and again, this is going to sound really crummy to say, I'm not trying to knock my industry colleagues. There are some real estate agents that have really great podcasts, but I have seen and heard things from real estate agents.
Should I apologize to Becky on your behalf?
No, because but you have an MBA. We went to school for economics.
Everybody has an MBA.
Well, okay, fine. But my point is, and again, I'm going to sound like a jerk, but like I think we know to some extent what we're talking about. Becky the realtor doesn't, and there's so much fluff. This is true in every industry. Okay, you could talk about sports and say like, well, everyone's got an opinion. You know, you scroll on an article on the Score, and you have the what do you call them? The basement, fair weather quarterbacks or whatnot. My point
armchair,
is, armchair quarterbacks. I just think that for us to have a conversation with no script, I'm taking some basic notes here, but just let's have a conversation about what's going on out there. Be completely honest. There's no cuts in this. We're not planning anything because what I'm seeing from real estate agents out there right now, there's a lot of that Jim Cramer, Bear Stearns is fine. And then there's a lot of people that actually don't really know anything and they don't know what to say. And they're still getting 25,000 views because it has the word tariffs in it.
Right.
Okay, so my last question is, and I made a note, I said I was going to come back to this before we started talking about the buyer pool and the A-plus listings that are going to sell in any market regardless. You had mentioned, because I asked you about worst case scenario, you had mentioned best case scenario for the real estate market, that is. It's a leading question. But all of a sudden, we see unemployment start rising. The Bank of Canada slashes interest rates. This is, of course, for those that don't remember, what happened during COVID. What could happen in our prime spring market if all of a sudden the buyers are empowered with more affordability?
Yeah, I mean, it could go completely the opposite, right? I mean, we could see another little boom. I hope we don't, because I don't think that we necessarily benefited from a real estate boom during a global pandemic either. That wasn't the point of the interest rate cuts.
Yeah.
But it could happen. So, I think if I'm taking anything away from this conversation, it's, I don't have a crystal ball, but we've been here before, right? To some extent, like the world's always falling apart. And, depending on the level of government and bank intervention during a economic crisis, this could go either way. Mm-hmm. So, for those of you that are, pregnant and need to buy a home, I think they're going to still do that. And I think that, we're going to see a robust spring market, regardless of what happens in the United States. And we'll keep a finger on the pulse.
Yeah. So I would say this as a final thought. I was reading on my blog today, one of the readers, Derek, who's a very frequent commenter, he said, I can't believe time flies. It's been 2 years already. It was January of 2023 when we were having this conversation about if this was market bottom. And he said the average home price around then was around 1040, 1050. It's there now. So, of course, there's seasonal volatility. The average home price has increased up to almost 1.2 million in May of 2023. But he basically said, we've had a flat market or flat growth, if you will, for 2 years. He said, congratulations to all those that predicted we would have a very flat market. So if I wanted to put a bow on this, I would say, despite 10 straight increases by the Bank of Canada to the overnight lending rate, we saw a market that didn't decline, and that's average home price in Toronto. So we're taking the stuff in the 905, we're taking the overbuilt condo market, and we're still not seeing a collapse or a calamity. And so now I'm going to look at this and I'm going to say, Coming into 2025, I was so bullish. I thought, and again, you go back to December where you take the couple that's pregnant and they're like, yeah, we're going to buy a house. And here they are 2 months later and people think the world's falling apart because Donald Trump and tariffs. But if you look at that and you say, okay, well, 2025, we've seen the interest rate decline from 5% to 3.25. We might have another cut in January, maybe one in March. The world is our oyster. And then all of a sudden all hell breaks loose because the president of the United States wants to start a trade war or wants to start to flex muscle. So we didn't see any real movement in prices. It was basically flat for 2 years when interest rates were high. We're now seeing interest rates decline. Yes, there is a lot of noise out there and there is potential for things to happen between the US, Canada, or worldwide. I, for one, don't think that the world's going to stop turning. I think you take anybody that needs to buy, wants to buy, anyone that needs to sell, wants to sell, and I think they're going to continue to do so.
I think it's going to be a strong spring market. I mean, nothing's changed for me yet. I'm taking clients out tonight. We've got some great listings coming up this spring. I don't know. I think that doubt and optimism are counter forces in the universe. I know that sounds a little ignorant, but I think that, the world's going to keep spinning and, the Toronto market is going to keep growing.
Doubt and optimism, counter forces. This guy's literally the living, breathing fortune cookie and horoscope. Well, folks, I hope you enjoyed today's somewhat unscripted, off-the-cuff chat between Chris and myself on Toronto tariffs and taxes. I might call it that. Actually, I don't know. I won't get to decide because Jonathan always picks the title. Guys, if you are watching on YouTube, feel free to write a comment. I love reading them. Wherever you get your podcasts, wherever you're listening, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. And we'll see you next time here on The Last Honest Realtor.